Welcome, 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 welcome. Welcome to day 18 of Exodus chapter 4. And so, our topic for today, of course, is Exodus chapter 4, but it is the Ulai Canal, Daniel's dreams. And so, um, and again, for you all that know me, you may know me as El Michelle. My name for the work of the Most High, is Alicia Ananiah Elda. And so I thank you all for coming in and joining me today for Exodus chapter 4 with the subject matter, Daniel's dream, the Ulai Canal. So thank you for coming in once again. And as you all know, and if you've been with me in teleconferences for Revelations, if you've been with me the last 17 times that we actually went through conference live, Exodus chapter 4, then you would know you're going to need a pen and a paper. You're going to have to take down notes if you would like. And I always let the viewers, the people in the teleconference, and everyone that comes in know where we are so you can go back and read the scriptures for yourself. Most High has commissioned me to do this work to enlighten people, to open up people's mind, to let you understand and know that at these times of now, to get to know who the Most High is if you don't know Him, to reconnect if you do, to get a better understanding of the information that was taken from you and oppressed from you. And so I'm not the only one out here doing this work. There's a lot of appointed and a call out here doing the work. And so, with that being said, we're definitely going to get into it. We have a lot of information to bring today. And I really just want everyone to get this word today and the message that the Most High intended to bring forth today. So let's definitely get into this word. As always, we start with a prayer. So, Most High, thank you for opening the hearts and the minds of your people. For those who do not know you, we ask and I hope and I pray that a seed be planted today, that some knowledge be obtained today, that enlightenment comes into someone's mind, into someone's heart today, so they may know you. Thank you for bringing us to this moment with all your grace and honor and your mercy, um, using me as your servant, using me to get this word out today, and being able to touch other people's hearts and minds. We ask that you come into the room and open up this word and bless this word today. So definitely, and hallelujah. So here we are. So I definitely want to get into it. We got a lot of information to cover today. So here we are again, day 18, the Horn of Africa, the Ulai Canal, and Daniel's dreams. So get those pen and papers out and let's get into this word today. So the last time we came in on day 17, we talked about quite a few things. We talked about Daniel's dream, gave you all a bit of information as far as like a history lesson. As you all always hear me say, that we're getting to this hidden prophecy, which we are. During this time of now, we have so much to contend with as a race, as a people, and as the human race, right? And so there's so much going on in the world. There's so much confusion in the world right now. And so a lot of people don't know what's believed. They don't know, they don't understand a lot of things. They have a lot of questions. And so when you see people like me out here doing the work, and I'm not just the only one, sometimes you stop and pay attention because you really might pick something up, okay? You might pick up some information. Go and seek and search the truth for yourself because the truth is out here. It's always been out here. You just have to be ready to open up your hearts and minds to the truth, especially at a time such as now. We talked about Exodus chapter. We were at Isaiah. I'm sorry, Isaiah 43, and so we went through Isaiah 42. We talked about Daniel's dream. Also, on day 17, it identified some groups. It profiled some groups, ethnic groups, by geographical locations, by religions. And so we're going to do that again today, because it's relevant. And so here is the seed of the matter at this point in time, is that you need to know who you are, right? You need to know who you are. You need to know who others are so you can still identify yourself. The whole thing is identifying who you are so you'll know what you need to do to go on to the next step. And so that's where we are, because no one ever told you who you are. How do you know what to do? And so that's where we are at a time such as now. So let's get into this word. So here again, the topic for today is the Horn of Africa. Excuse me, the Ulai Canal in Daniel's dream. And so we're going to start in Isaiah chapter 43, going back over from day 17, um, verses 3, 6, and 11. So it reads, Isaiah 43, 3, For I am Yahweh your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. I've given Egypt as a ransom, Ethiopia and Seba in your place. So Isaiah 43, let's break the scripture down. And so this scripture, Isaiah 43, is mentioning people. It mentions, it says, I'm Yahweh your God, right? So it gives, when people identify God, like the God of Christianity, it gives a name, right? Because we used to understand God as being God, but then it references an exact name. And then it says, I am the Holy One of Israel. So it connects Yahweh to this place, this geographical location. And then it also goes on to state that Yahweh is the Savior for Israel. All right. And then it goes on to say in Isaiah 43, 3, that I've given Egypt as your ransom and Ethiopia and Seba in your place. And so it's basically saying that here, Israel, you're not here. You're not here in this place right now. And because you're not here in this place, here's Ethiopia and Seba here in this place right now. But here's also Egypt. And so until you get back here, we're gonna hold captive Egypt. And so that's what it's saying. And so Isaiah 43, pay attention to it, because what is mentioning is mentioning people. It's mentioning people as nations, and it's also mentioning places, geographical locations. So pay attention to that. So let's go on. And so there's a word that came up in my research. And so this word that came up is Havala. Havala. So make sure you write this down and go and research this, but I'll share this research with you. So Havala, Havilah. What is Havala in the Bible? And by the way, I found this in Havala is a biblical reference to Seba, SCBA. So when it mentioned Ethiopia and Seba, Seba being a place, it also came up. The word Havala also came up. And so let's get into what is Havala. So Havala, the origins of it is a Hebrew word. And so Havala refers to a land and a people. So in Isaiah 43, when it mentioned nations and a people, it was referencing Havala. Havala. So Havala in Hebrew means land and a people. And so when you see the word Havala, it's mentioned several times in the Bible. And so the one time that this information it references twice. And so once is Genesis chapter 2, verses 10 and 11, which we'll go into. And then the other time associated to this information today is mentioned in Genesis chapter 10. Again, we'll definitely get into that too. And so here, let's get into that. And so let's read Genesis 10 through 14. So chapter 2, 10 through 14. So let's get into that. And I found it in a NIV, the National International Version of the Bible. And so in Genesis chapter 2, 10, it reads, a river watering the garden flowed from Eden. From there, it separated into four headwaters. The name of the first headwater is Pishon, Pishon. It winds through the entire land of Havilah, where there is gold. The gold of that land is good. Aromatic resin and onyx are also there in Havilah. The name of the second river is Gihon. Forgive me if I don't pronounce some of these words correctly. I always spell them. Sometimes in translation, even if I were to look up the pronunciation in the transposition of languages or even pronunciation, might miss correct pronunciation. So I do spell it. And so here, the name of the second river is Gihon, Gihon. It winds through the entire land of Cush. The name of the third river is Tigris. It runs along the east side of Ashur. And the fourth river is Euphrates. Now, here in Genesis 10 through 14, which chapter 2, 10 through 14, which I read, it's talking about the four headwaters, the four bodies of water that runs from the Garden of Eden. And so oftentimes and for a long time, people couldn't understand where is Eden? Where is Eden? And where exactly are these headwaters? And so when it was mentioned in Genesis chapter 2, verses 10 through 14, is very relevant to the message today. Because again, Havala is mentioned as places and these nations. And so if it references specifically names, is you have to go look them up in your research. If it's give us a proper name, right? It's important to go look it up because you cannot be confused in the message. And so this is what I did. And so when it talked about Eden, we need to know where is Eden. And so let's go. Let me share this research with you. So where is Eden? Now, when I was looking up where is Eden, of course, you get all these maps, all these different maps. And so of course it's research, but why all the different maps? And while some of the maps look similar, some of them have been adjusted, right? And so here we are. So all maps of where Eden. Most of the maps point to Iraq as being Eden or ancient Mesopotamia. And so you might ask yourself, why does one map say Iraq? Why does one map say Mesopotamia? Um, and so again, if you start doing the research, right, and you start following up these specific names, and you'll find is that a lot of the information has been altered, it's been adjusted, and I talk about this several times throughout my teachings. And so when we talk about a veiling and we talk about a covering, so there's a reason why these things have been covered up. There's a reason why these things have been adjusted. There's a reason why the names and the transposition has been changed. And so it's all part of the covering up. It's all part of the veiling. And so you wouldn't get to the truth. That's just quite bluntly said. And so let's get back to this. Where is Eden? Eden, all the maps point to Iraq and ancient Mesopotamia. So how do we verify that? So what's verifiable information based on Genesis chapter 2, 10 through 14? So let's get to that. First, it talked about the four headwaters. And so I wanted to do further research on where the four headwaters were. And so, because the maps were a bit confusing for me. And so the four headwaters. So it mentioned Pison. And then also when I was doing the research, where I saw one spelling for Pison, Pishon, it was also spelled Pison. And so this headwater, this body of water, runs from the Persian Gulf across Egypt. Egypt is Havala, to the Red Sea. So close by Pasan is the upper Nile River, which they call the White Nile. It's the upper uh, Nile River. Okay. And so when we hear the Red Sea, what happened in the Red Sea from biblical history? That's where the Most High parted the Red Sea during the Exodus. So Israel can part and wouldn't have to go around, basically went through the body of water, the Red Sea, went through the sea. And so the Most High parted it, right? Parted the water. And so that Israel can walk across the bottom of the sea. And it was dry land. Okay. And so here, This is a biblical story. And so, what happens? And I want to step away from the word for a minute and not dwell too long on my point I'm going to make. And so here we people are so confused now, and they're so into question on um the truth, or what's true in the Bible, what's not, what was altered, what was not, what did man do, um, and so these are the questions that come up, and so people don't know what to believe. And so what I found, and this whole time that I've been researching and getting to learn the word and teaching and going deeper and deeper, right? What I found is that who and here's a question that a lot of people ask. So who knows the truth? Is the truth the truth? Where is the evidence, right? And so, um, who can actually really verify the truth? Who can actually verify whether there is God, whether there is Yah, whether was a Yeshua, whether there was Jesus, what's real, what's not. And so the only individual that can actually verify it was the one that was there. And we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of years. And so is that person evidentially here and around? Most likely not. And if they are, haven't come forward and said anything. And so what's the best that we can do at a time like this is to, for me, it was to match up the physical evidence with the the story or the history, and does it line up? And that's basically all that we can do, um, short of having faith and believe. Okay, and so let me get back to this four headwaters, and the word said that Pishan ran through the entire. This body of water ran through the entire land of Havilah, and Havilah is Egypt. Okay, and it said it ran across Egypt to the Red Sea. So this body of water ran across Egypt, and then as it ran across Egypt, it met another body of water, which was the Nile River. And so, what do we know about the Nile River? The Nile River is where, right, Pharaoh's daughter picked Moses up out of the water as a baby. Okay, let's keep going. Gihon, Gihon, and it's spelled Gihon. It was also spelled Gishon, and so it winds through Cush, Cush. And so when we hear of Cush, Cush is a ancient biblical name for, but the current place of Cush is Ethiopia. It's Ethiopia, and so remember what. Um, Isaiah 43 said. It says, I'm holding Egypt as a ransom, right? And it said, I'm holding Egypt as a ransom. And it said, Ethiopia and Seba are in your place. And so now we know Ethiopia is Cush. And so when it talks about this river, Gihon, it winds through Ethiopia and it empties into the Red Sea. And so here we have another headdress, and with this headdress is emptying into the Red Sea. um Here's two bodies of water that runs to the Red Sea. So now it's Pishon and it's Gihon, right? One runs across Egypt and one runs across Ethiopia. Now, with Gihon, it empties into the Red Sea, but there's also the Nile River that runs within a few miles of it, and that's the lower Nile. So there's an upper Nile and there's a lower Nile. The upper Nile is called the White Nile, and the lower Nile is called the Blue Nile. All right. And so often when you hear names, proper nouns of people or places, the names are significant. It has a meaning. And so the research gave the name Gihon. It means to bust forth, gushing. So let's keep going. So Tigris and Euphrates are the other two bodies of water. And so the Tigris and Euphrates rivers are the easternmost rivers. And so when the word said where it ran, and let me repeat what the word said, it said the name of the third river is Tigris. It runs along the east side of Ashur, and the fourth river is Euphrates. So they run along the east side. Now, here, um, let's talk about Tigris first. So Tigris runs along the east side of Iraq. Iraq is also known as modern day Syria. So now we have these different names that have been changed for the same place. Iraq is also known as modern day Syria. In biblical times, Syria was known as Assyria. And so you understand when I just stated that these names of the same place, and we're talking about a geographical location specifically. So we were talking about, for example, a specific location, and the name has been changed several times. And why was it changed? Why didn't it stay the same? Because of the cover up, right? And so here, Syria, back in the biblical times, it was called Assyria. It was also called Ashur. And so when it talked about the Tigris and Euphrates rivers running, it ran alongside of Ashur. And so here, to identify in the modern day, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers run on the east side of Syria. Okay? Again, if you were to look at this on a map, which I have, it's a bit confusing because on some of the maps, you're looking for this river, you're looking for these bodies of water, you're looking for it to be named, but it looks like it's placed higher instead of being lower running along the river. This again is part of the veiling, the covering up, okay? And so it took me a minute to figure that it's been adjusted. All right. Um, and so Assure, Assure, or was called also Ashur. And so what did Assure mean? Assure was for the Assyrian god. It was named for the Assyrian god. It was also spelled Assur. And so Ashur was also known as Ashur, and then in Arabic, it's, if I'm pronouncing this correctly, forgive me if I'm not, call it Shirkat, call it Shirkat. It was the capital of the old Assyrian state. It was the Middle Assyrian Empire, and for a time, it was the empire of the Neo-Assyrian. All right, so the Assyrian of that time. And so, what happens with these rivers? The river flows south from the mountains of the Armenian highlands. It flows through the Syrian and Arabian deserts, and it empties into the Persian Gulf. Okay, so that was the Tigris River. And so, some of you all may be asking, why is she going into these locations and all of this history and geography? Because it's important. You must know about these places because it's relevant. It's relevant to the covering. It's relevant to the oppression of information. It's going to answer your questions. So when you have very relevant questions of what, who, where, why. It's going to answer a lot of those questions you need to know. So we're going to get back into the scriptures, and the scriptures are added into the message. But these are the things that you need to know in order to get to where we're going. To know the people that have added to the confusion or have helped um, the unveiling, and so whatever aspect they played in the whole matter. um This particular Tigris River is the river of the same name, mark one of the boundaries of the land promised by Yah to Abraham and his descendants. So descendants being Isaac and Jacob, right? And the descendants and the generations after. Euphrates River runs down the east side of Iraq. And one of the map, it appears to run um, down through Babylonia to Sumner. Sumner name being changed. People still don't know where exactly where Babylonia is. They say it's the Americas. So there's a lot of confusion there, right? Again, it's part of the veiling, right? And so let's keep going. So when we talk about these four headwaters of water, we know where they're initiated from, right? And so I'm going to repeat that information, but still sticking with the information here about Euphrates. Let me give you a little bit of information about Euphrates. Euphrates is the longest and one of the most historically important rivers of Western Asia. So, together with Tigris, it's one of the two defining rivers of Mesopotamia. So, these two rivers they originate in Turkey. Uh, and then again, the Euphrates flows through Assyria, right? And Iraq, and it joins the Tigris. So these two rivers run on the east side of Assur, Syria. They they are close to each other, and they run along each other until they merge, right? And then when they merge, they flow into the Gulf, the Persian Gulf. And so, um, just a bit of information. You'll find very interesting that I'm going to share with you in just a bit about these two rivers, okay? Um, and when I share this information with you about these two rivers, you're going to find it quite interesting because it lines up with a prophecy. So let me keep going. So the research I found about these two rivers, these are Iraq's two main rivers, the Euphrates and the Tigris. And some research, it said it'll completely run dry in 2 decades. So in 2 decades, these two main rivers, Euphrates and Tigris, will be completely dry. Um, so what this report said, unless some type of action is taken, um, the country's water ministry has warned that these two rivers, which originate in Turkey and run through Syria, that's the biggest source of Iraq's water supply. 98% of the water runs through Iraq, comes from these two water sources. And this report was generated December 3rd, 2021. We talk about in 20 years, these two rivers are going to dry up. And this is Iraq's main water supply. I don't want to dwell too long, but that's some outstanding information that was just given December 3rd, 2021. And how and why in 20 years would would a river dry up? And so if you heard about the prophetic warnings of the end times, right? And you think about it lining up with a biblical prophecy of when the water was tainted, right? During the time of the Exodus, when it was turned to blood from the Most High, right? For Egypt. And so here we are again in a time where we're talking about a main water supply being affected for the general population. 98% of the water supply. That's big. That's big, right? It seems insignificant because it's general information. But imagine if you lived in a place, right? And the main water supply was affected, right? What would you do? And so that's relevant. So what does the Bible say about Euphrates River? So when it talks about the Euphrates River and it lines up with a biblical prophecy, this is what the information said. At the Euphrates River, this is where in Revelations it talked about the sixth angel. The sixth angel was at the site of the Euphrates River, and the sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river, Euphrates, and its water was dried up to prepare the way for the kings from the east. When we talk about these angels, right, that came forth during the times of revelations and the end times, here is this biblical prophecy lining up with factual information. And it's saying in 20 years, this water is going to be lined up. And here on the end times, the last days, here is this biblical prophetic information saying, here's the sixth angel, and it mentions Euphrates again, and it's saying the sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and the water was dried up. And why was the water dried up? Because it prepared the way for the kings for the east. Now, what it didn't share with you in the information is that when this information was reported as far as these two rivers drying up, they have no substantial or conclusional evidence of why this river is going to dry up. It wasn't in the information, it wasn't in the research. They're baffled as to why this river is going to dry up, but they know for sure they've stated this river is going to dry up. Now, here is where your belief comes into question, because here in Revelations is telling you what the sixth angel did, right? And there was only seven angels during the time of Revelation, right? And here the word was telling you back then, and they said prophetic to the time of now, this is what's going to happen. And so you get this factual information that's from today, modern day, that's lining up with a biblical prophecy, and it's specifically talking about the same river and the fact that it's going to be dried up. Do you think that's a coincidence? Make it what you will. All right, we're gonna keep going. So it says, the sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up to prepare a way for the kings from the east. So who wrote this? John. John, right? So who was John? John was possibly the apostle of a container of God's anger. And so when God was angry, God entered, emptied on the ancient land of Babylon, which is now Iraq. Babylonia, which is now Iraq. We remember people were still questioning, where is Babylonia? All right. Let me keep going in this word. Bear with me a second. So I'd like to bring you research, modern day uh, evidence, which I guess will be evidential or the substantial evidence. And I'd like to show how it lines up with prophecy. Still, some people won't believe it, but at least you have the physical, tangible evidence, and what you choose to believe is really, really up to you. So here, bear with me a minute. Bear with me a minute. Man, just lost. All right, so bear with me a second, y'all. All right, so here we go. Um, so here, let's see what we're talking about. So let's get to Genesis chapter 10. And so Genesis chapter 10, remember, was mentioned, right? So in Genesis chapter 10, when he talked about Havilah, so we just read Genesis chapter 2, but also Havilah was mentioned in Genesis 10. And so remember, Havilah was about the people and the nations. And so here in Genesis chapter 10, which we'll get into, is talking about who they are, who you are. Remember, you can't know where you're going if you don't know who you are. If you don't know who you are, you don't even know the correct place to go. Okay? And so here in Genesis chapter 10, make sure you write it down and go read it. It talks about the table of nations who it identifies who the people are. And so here, when it talked about the table of nations, and it talked about the generations that are going to inherit the land, you need to identify, because some people say, oh, we come from Noah, or we come from Jacob, or we come from Isaac, or we're this tribe, and so on. And so when what's coming up eventually is a hidden prophecy, right? But we got to get to that point so you can have a very clear understanding. And so here we are on Genesis chapter 10, and it's talking about the table of nations. And so here, let's start in Genesis chapter 10. So here, in Genesis chapter 10, the table of nations, this is the account of Shem, Ham, Japheth, Noah's sons, Noah's sons who themselves had sons after the flood, right? The flood was the big reset. You even hear people talking about the reset now, right? But we're talking about the reset, which was the flood. All right. So let's break this down. So the Habathites, Japhethhites. Japheth, we say that is not the correct pronunciation, but I spelled it for you. And so, who were the sons of Japheth? Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshach, and Taraz. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Shabbath had 7 sons, right? Um, when we spoke on day 17, it mentioned the 7 sons, right? And it associated the 7 sons to places. Remember, we're talking about Havala, the places and the nations. And so what we found on day 17, when it talked about the 7 sons, and it was referencing the geographical location, it was talking about 7 islands, which were named the 7 sons of Seba, or Sabi Islands, and 6 of them were volcanoes, and one of them was a huge volcano, or a hill or mountain that had a volcano at the top. And so here we're talking about the 7 sons of Japheth, or Habath, and it mentions again Gomer, Magog, Madai, Havan, Tubal, Meshach, and Tiras. And so let's go on. And so here, the first son of Japheth, one thing before I go into the one of the sons. When you've heard the word Magog before, Magog. So in day 17, a lot of these sons, and what happened in biblical times, whenever someone settled into an actual geographical land, they named the land after themselves, and they named the people after themselves and the land. And so and day 17, I was actually breaking down the names of the people associated to the lands. And so we can pick some of that up here and there. I can always go back, but you're going to find some of the same information repeated. Okay. So let's get into the sons of Japheth. So one of the sons of Japheth was named Gomer. And so here was Gomer's sons: Ashkenaz, Ripath, and Togarmah. When I mentioned in day 17th, and I was talking about this geographical location, um, one of the one of the identities associated to a geographical location was the Ashkenazic, the Khazars, and then it's associated to a geographical location. And so here, this is the same identity. It's the same identity. So one of the sons of Gomer is this historical, biblical, geographical connection to this group of people in modern day that are identified. And so here, these Ashkenaz, Ashkenazic Khazaric group of people identified today that stem from the biblical trickle down, right, are these same people that when you follow it back biblically, their matriarch was Gomar, right? Okay. Now, one of Gomar's um well, Gomar had three sons. Then remember, Japheth was their father. And so then Gomar was one of the sons. And so these are Gomar's sons as the Kanaz, Riphath, and the Gomar, to Gomar, sorry. And then another one of Japheth's sons was Javan. And so Javan's sons, Elisha, Elish, Tarshish, the Catates, and the Rodanites. Now, instead of mentioning, well, it mentioned two sons here. These were the sons of Javan. Ultimately, Javan was Japheth's grandson. Okay. And so I know sometimes when you're reading the Bible and it starts talking about these hereditary ties, it gets a bit confusing to a lot of people. But it's mentioned for a very specific reason. So I wanted to go through this because during the times of now, it's identifying who these people are and who you are. And so you need to understand that. When getting back to the sons of Javan, I mentioned two again, Elise and Tarshish. And so didn't mention a group of people by name, not just one person. It talked about the Kittites and the Rodanites. And so why under the sons of Javan is it talking about why is it plural? And it's mentioning two groups of people. And so it says from these, the maritime people spread out unto their territories by their clans with their nations, each with its own language. So Javan's sons, two of them, they became they became groups of people. So you have Elish, you have Tarshish, and then you have these groups of people that broke off, right, and became their own identifiable groups. So you understand when geographically or by ethnicity, what happened, why you have all these different nationalities and groups and people when they develop their own lifestyles, their own way of doing things. So here was the development of different nations is actually what was occurring. All right. And so then you have the Hamites. The Hamites were the sons of Ham. And so here was the sons of Ham. Cush, right? Which was Ethiopia. You have Egypt. You have Put, P-U-T, and Canaan. And so now it's so funny, it's so ironic that you're hearing Egypt. You're hearing about Canaan. You're hearing about the Canaanites. You're hearing about Cush, Egypt. At the time such as now, it's almost like the Hamites. They're in the news. They're these people that are identified not as being Hamites, but under their own nations, like Egypt and Ethiopia. Nobody's walking around going, "Oh, you're a Hamite." They're identifying people with where they're from, not their biblical history. And so that's why it's good to identify all the information associated to an ethnicity or a geographical group. And so let's keep going. And so then under the sons of Ham, who was the sons of Cush? Ethiopia, right? These people that were from Ethiopia. So remember, you had Seba, you have a Havala, you have Septa, you have Ram, and you have Septeka, right? So the sons of Cush, one, two, were five, right? Remember in Isaiah 43, it talked about Seba, this place, right? And it mentioned Havala, Egypt. And so here, these sons of Cush, it was Ethiopia, it was Egypt, it was Ram, and it was Septeka. These were the sons of Cush. And so these places, these names of these individual sons were identified to these places. You need to know, what about these people in Ethiopia? What about these people in Egypt? What is with them? This is why. Okay, we're gonna keep going. And then um, Ram, Raamah, Ram. He had two sons, Sheba, Sheba, and Dedan. What do we know? We've heard about Sheba. We don't hear much about Dedan, Dedan, but we hear about Sheba. Like, is it Queen of Sheba? Sheba. That's what we've heard about, right? So let's keep going. So Cush was the father of Nimrod. Cush was a person. Remember, Cush was the son of Ham, right? And then when we go back, under the son of Ham, who was Ham? Ham. When we go all the way back and we think about Ham, who was Ham's grandfather? Japheth, right? And so it associated these people to these territories and these places. Okay, so we're gonna keep going. Um, it's instead of talking about like every single one of these individuals, you haven't heard about every single one of these individual sons and their territories, but it talks about some of them specifically for a reason. And so when the research and the information and the biblical reference comes up, one of the information it talks about is Cush. And so Cush was the father of Nimrod, who became a mighty warrior on the earth. When we hear about Nimrod, mighty warrior, he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. That is why he said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. And so, what about Nimrod? Nimrod, and this place of Cush, it was the first sinners of the kingdom of Babylon. That's why Cush became associated, Egypt became associated to Babylonia. Hello. It was the first sinners of his kingdom. They were Babylon. They were Uruk, Uruk, Akkad, Akkad, and Kalna, Kalnih. In Shirna or Shinar, Shinar. From that land, he went to Assyria, where he built Nineveh, Rehoboth, Kala, and Rezin. And so you talk about this mighty hunter who was from Egypt. Egypt was considered Babylonia at the time. And when the word and the research talked about how these people went and built their own territories and they developed their own language and their own lifestyles, then it's specifically talked about here was Cush, and here was Nimrod. Um, Cush was Nimrod's grandfather, and so they had a like-mindedness. And so here was Nimrod, and he took himself and he went to develop his own land, right? And then when he developed his own land, he didn't just develop his own land, but he also established other territories and other places. And so all the people in the same land and territory had a like-mindedness and same lifestyles and way of doing things, right? And so that's where when he took himself over, he started building Assyria, and he built Nineveh, and he built Rehoboth and Kala and Rezin. So his territory began to expand, and so the people in these territories all had a like-mindedness and a lifestyle and way of doing things which they were expected to perform and do. Okay, and so it says Nineveh and Calais became a great city. And so then the research went on, or not the research, but the word in Genesis 10 on the table of nations, excuse me, went on to mention Egypt. So who was Egypt? Egypt was the father of the Ludites, Anamites, Ahabites, Neptulites, Peruthites, Cashluites. And so it mentioned these groups now. We're talking about groups of people now under Egypt. And so Egypt, Babylonia, was this place where all these nations came together. And so I'm going to step ahead just a little bit and plant the seed. When it talked about Egypt, and when it talked about Egypt and it talked about the Exodus, it was the place where all these nations, all these people were from all these different places. And so when it became a thought and a mind process, and the people became one because they were connected by slavery. So you had all these different people from all these different places and all these different lifestyles and all these way of doing things, right? They may not even been able to initially talk to each other or conversate because they had language barriers, but then they became connected because of a cause, which was slavery. And when they became connected with a cause, they began to understand each other because they spent time with each other. And so over time, they became known as a one people and a nation. And so when they left through the Exodus, they were considered a one nation. They joined together and they left because they had an understanding of what was the purpose and what was the point. It was Israel. All right. At that time, they were one nation. And so when we hear about the word saying it was one nation in Exodus, and then they were sent to all the other places, and the Most High says, when you come back, I need you to come back the same way you left. When you left is Israel, and you're supposed to come back. I need you to come back and be as one. That's the expectation of the Most High. We're going to keep going. So here in Genesis 10:13, and it talked about again the Ludites, the Anamites, the Lehabatites, the Neptulites, the Peruthites, the Casluhites. And so it specifically talked about the Casluhites. I'm going to spell this Kasluhites. It says this is where the Philistines came from, and the Caphtorites. All right. And so the Philistines, this specific group was significant for a reason. Um, Canaan. Then they talked about Canaan. We hear about the Canaanites. We hear about Canaan. What did Canaan do? And so Canaan was the father of Sidon, which was his firstborn, of the Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites. And so these clans, whenever you hear when you hear about a clan, right? When you hear about clans in modern day, most of the time we associate a clan to an Irish descendant or Irish ethnicity. It doesn't say tribe, but it said clan. Um, just throwing that out there. And so here, Canaan, and so also because I threw it out there, I want to say this that it also could be misleading as well. All right. And so here, let's get back to Canaan. Um, it said, I'm gonna read this again. Sidon was Canaan's firstborn, his firstborn of the Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites, the Gershites, the Havatites, the Arkites, the Sinites, the Arvadites, the Semirites, and the Hamathites. Right? So from Sidon and Canaan being the grandfather came a lots of groups of people. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 groups of people, clans they were identified came from Sidon, from Canaan, right? So later the Canaanite clans scattered and the borders of Canaan reached from Sidon toward Gerar as far as Gaza, and then towards Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboiim, and as far as Lasha. Now, if those of you, let me step away from this word for a moment because it may have been day 8, the day 8, day 9, day 10, and the word mentioned geographical location. Right? We already know now by going through this today that these nations are associated to places, right? These names of people because they when they went through the lands and they took over a land, they named the land and the people after them, right? And so and I don't know, day 8, 9, 10, the word mentioned exactly the destruction of a place and a people, that the land was left desolate. And it actually said these words here. It said from Gerar to Gaza, towards Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zeboim, as far as Lasha. The word said it exactly. And so here this places was mentioned in reference to Canaanite. So basically what the word was saying there was that here was this place, this geographical location where it's desolate now and it was destroyed. Whenever you hear about Sodom and Gomorrah being destroyed, there were other uh, affiliates, other places that were connected to it. And so when that word mentioned Sodom and Gomorrah, it also associated Gaza is associated with it. Admah is associated with it. Zeboian is associated with it. And Lasha is associated with it. And also, let me add this to the information that a lot of these are some of the same places. But again, when we started the word today, it talked about the names being changed. So it could be some of these could be one in the same place, but veiled or covered up. Okay. But nevertheless, it's still the same location. And so when you heard about Sodom and Gomorrah being destroyed, it no longer exists. It's a desolately barren land. There's no more people. There's no more grass that grows. There's no more anything. It's basically just right now a plain. A plain. Okay. Now, um, the Seminites. The Seminites. The Seminites. Their sons were also born to Shem. So Shem was one of Japheth's sons. And so the sons were also born to Shem, whose older brother was Japheth. Shem was the ancestor of all the sons of Eber. Now, bear with me a second. Um, so let's talk about Shem's sons. So Shem's sons, what was Shem's sons? Elam, Ashur, Aphax, Lud, and Aram. Day 17, and the word connects with these sons and their territories. Biblical prophecy for the time of now connects with these sons and their geographical locations. You'll see, make sure you take note of this when it comes up. On day 17, I mentioned Aram. Aram, Aram was also a Greek god. They named Aram, and also they in one language it says Aram, and then another language it says Aman. And then when I also mentioned Aman to you, Aman was also uh, transcribed by transposed by dialect, meaning Aman, and it referenced a Greek god. And so then coincidentally, when in Christianity, when they say prayer and end of prayer or they stand in agreement, they say amen. And so in some of uh, the transcription of dialect, it referenced saying this Greek god's name, right? An agreement. And so here is where the confusion, one of the things that when people, biblical scholars and people argue, this is one of the things they say because sometimes people don't understand, they're following protocol and they're following traditions without a full understanding. And so here what came out of the research and out of the information that I've shared with people over time. I did from day 17, and I'll share again. What we do often as people, we were conditioned, and it's not okay that we were conditioned, but we have to. Once you know better, you're supposed to do better. Okay. You hear people who have come into an awareness and they've done the research or they've been taught, they're getting fallen into the truth. one of the things that, and look this up, I'll share with you, is when we end the prayer and we say amen, we could possibly be given acknowledgement to a deity. Now, we were taught in Christianity, uh, 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 in our religions, that when we are in agreement, or we love something, or we like something, or we reference and we're giving an old or crediting God, that we say amen, not knowing that we're praying to one God, but we're also giving an ode or credit to another God by saying amen and acknowledging. So that has added to the confusion. What you need to do at this point is take this information and research it and find out if it's true or not. When somebody told me that, I went to look it up. I didn't come about the information the way I just shared with you. It was acknowledged and I found it. But now that you have the information, find out if it's true. And once you know better, you're supposed to do better. And sometimes it is okay to, um some groups will actually, like, basically run you through the coals because you said God or you said amen, but you have to get unconditioned from something you've been taught all your life. It's the same way it was progressively given to you. For some people, it has to progressively be removed. And so sometimes you may slip up. Sometimes I slip up. But once you come into the light and you come into the awareness, eventually you're going to stop doing it. The more you understand and the more you research and the closer you get to Yah, a lot of things you're going to stop doing anyway. It's progressive for a lot of us. All right, so let's get back to this word. We were talking about the sons of Shem. We were talking about Elam, Ashur, Ashur meaning a place. Ashur being associated to Assyria, right? Ashur being associated to the group of people, the Assyrians, or the place that Assyria. It's all one and the same. Again, changed and changed and changed again. We talk about Arphaxad and Lud and Aram, right? Aram, associated to a location in Greece, a religion, a group of people. All right. Now, remember they branched out. And so here in Genesis 10, it started talking about the first son of Shem. It started talking about Aram first. Aram. So who was Aram? So let's talk about Aram. Aram sons were Uz, Hul, Hul, Gether, and Meshach. Four sons. Aram had four sons. They branched out. Um, Here was another son of Shem, um, Arphaxad. Arphaxad was the father of Shelah. Shelah was the father of Eber. So it's not talking about all these sons, it's talking about specific ones. So Eber had two sons. Two sons were born in Eber. One was named Peleg, because in his time the earth was divided, and his brother was named Joktan, right? It's spelled Joktan. Again, in dialect, transcription and dialect, in our country, we pronounce things that should be pronounced with an H with a J. So some may say Joktan, but it's Haktan, right? In a lot of languages, those J should actually be H, right? So Haktan. Haktan was the father of Alamadad, Shalaf, Hasmaveth, Hara, Hadom, Haram, Uzal, Dikla, Abal, Abamel, Sheba, Ophir, Hevelah, and Johab. So Joktan had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 heirs. So all of these were the sons of Joktan, Haktan. And so imagine the more children you had, and they went off to do their own thing. the bigger the territory you have. Okay? So let's get into this next word, Genesis 30. It said, the region where they live stretched from Misha towards Sapphira in the eastern hill country, right? Because these 13 sons spread out. These are the sons of Shems by their clan and languages in their territories and their nations. These are the clans of Noah's sons, according to their lines of descent within their nations. From these nations, they spread out all over the earth after their flood. Now, this is what I want to tell you as I've been explaining this. You know how if you've been reading the Bible and it starts to talk about hereditary lines and who's connected to who and who begat who and all of that. It's confusing a lot of times, and honestly, sometimes people lose interest. But once you start to break it down and understand it, and I hope I've done a decent job for you, so you walked away with an understanding of it, took notes so you can get back to it. So when you start to get to hidden prophecy, and as you're picking up this information, you're going to have a light bulb moment. Like, okay, I understand. Now I understand why the Most High did this to this nation. Oh, I understand why the Most High saved this nation. Oh, I understand why the Most High loved these people over here and hated this nation over here. And so that understanding starts to come in a full circle. All right. So that was Genesis 10. Now I want to get back to, remember, Havala. Havala meaning here's this nation and here's these people. So the meaning of the name Havala, what does Havala mean? It means that suffers pain, that brings forth. Let's get back to the scriptures now. So everything that I just mentioned to you, here these names are going to come up again as we get into these scriptures. Here's some meanings that are going to come full circle, right? And so I wanted to get through that history lesson, that geography lesson, talking about hereditary generational ties, because it's going to come up in these scriptures as we get closer to the hidden prophecy. Okay, and so here, let's go into Isaiah 43. 3, 6, and 11. I'm going to repeat this again. Chapter 43, verses 3, 6, and 11. For I am Yahweh your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. I have given Egypt as your ransom, Ethiopia and Seba in your place. What is Havilah in the Bible? It's the biblical reference to a place called Seba. And so here, remember I said that these names kept changing and changing, and places kept changing and changing for the covering and for the veiling. And so they gave Ethiopia one name, Cush. But guess what? Ethiopia is now modern day Yemen. 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 The name Ethiopia is Hebrew and Cush. It's in Hebrew it's called Cush, right? Here you have this place, Ethiopia, which you've heard about. It's also called Yemen. It's also called Cush, right? It may have been changed on a map, the names. It's still the same place. And so it's mentioned in the Bible numerous times. Okay, 37 times in the King James Version they mention Cush. And so anyway, Ethiopia, Yemen, Cush. And so in many ways they consider Ethiopia to be a holy place. Now, get into a little bit of originality, origin of the word Cush. The word Cush, Cushi, or Kush, Kushi. It is actually a Hebrew word. It's generally used in Hebrew. When in biblical times, when they developed that word Cush, it was to mean a place and the people looked a certain way. And so when they would say Cush, everybody in biblical times knew that when Cush was referred to, it was a place where the people were dark skinned. The people were dark skinned in Cush. And so when they said, I'm going to Cush, they knew they was going to the place of the dark skinned people. And when they talked about Cush, And in often places still now they talk about Cush. They talk about the people being dark skinned, dark complexion, right? It's changed over time, but back then in biblical times when they said Cush, they knew where they were. They could identify it to the geographical location and what the people looked like. All right. So Cush was traditionally considered the ancestor of the land of Cush. The ancient territory believed to have been located near the Red Sea. Um, and often, and Cush was identified in the Bible with the kingdom of Cush or ancient Sudan. So here we're going to throw another place in the midst. Sudan is in on the maps. Egypt is on the map. Ethiopia is on the map. So you have all these places that they're on the map. They're on different maps. So that's why people get confused. All right. Let's go to Isaiah 43:6. And it says, I will tell the north, give them up. Where and then it says, and tell the south, don't hold them back. Bring my sons from far away and my daughters from the ends of the earth. I want to get back to the scripture and break this down because now we're still talking about the nations and the people, right? This is what the word is bringing us today, the message, so you can know. So Isaiah 43:6, it says, I will tell the north, give them up. Where is the north? Where is the location of the north? What nations are in the north? So today it's Turkey, it's Syria, it's Ethiopia, it's Lasemish, okay? And so, I'm sorry, it's Ethiopia. And so the north, this is the most high stand. He's talking about the ransom being held until the nation come back, right? The group comes back that they were scattered everywhere. They started off as different people from everywhere, and because they were scattered to all these different places, they've become nationals, immigrants from different places till they get back, right? E with the E, not immigrants, but E, right? And so when they get back, there's going to be one nation. But right now, they're nationals and immigrants from different places. And so here's the most high saying. I'm going to tell these people in Syria and Turkey and Ethiopia. It's north of Iraq, right? Babylon. I want you to give up my people, send my people back, right? Because I'm holding Egypt ransom. And so, in the message today, it talks about also Daniel's dream. And so here is where in the word today is talking about Daniel's dream because I'm sorry, not Daniel's dream, but it's talking about this individual associated to biblical. They didn't necessarily call this person. You've heard about him. His name is Alexander the Great, but in the word they don't say Alexander the Great. The word just says Alexander. And so when you see research about Alexander the Great, Alexander, make sure you look it up. They talked about when something happened to Alexander and he passed away because he was this great fighter, he was this great general, he held armies. He supposedly built this great wall in this location. So it was all this information associated to Alexander. And when Alexander, who was this great soldier who held, he was commander over armies, he passed away. And when he passed away, there were four generals that took his place. And so when you start doing research on the word, one of the generals that was the general over the north when Alexander passed away, his name was Lysichmus. L-Y Lysichmus. Lysimachus. He was one of the four generals from Daniel's dream. And so in Isaiah 43, chapter 43:6, the Most High said, tell the South, don't hold them back. So who was the Most High talking to? The Most High was talking to the countries that were south of Iraq. He was talking to Saudi Arabia. He was talking to Sudan. He was talking to Eritrea. He was talking to Yemen. He was talking to Kuwait. He said, wherever my people are in your countries, I want them to, don't hold them coming back to the land. I want them to come back. He was talking to these places. Don't be a snare to my people. Let them come back, right? And so, then that, so here it's talking about the four generals that took over Alexander passed away. So another other general was called Seleucus, and Seleucus, he took over Asia, he took over Babylon, and he took over Kuwait. The fourth general was Ptolemy. He was from the four generals in Daniel's dream. And so when the Most High said, um, bring my sons from far away, he was mentioning past all these parameters, past all these people, with an understanding that they're not just in the north or south of Iraq or Babylonia. They're everywhere because the Most High said in the Word, and you might notice that they were scattered to the four corners of the earth, right? And the directions of the four winds, right? And so here was the Most High saying, bring my sons from far away and my daughters from the ends of the earth. So I want to identify, why did the Most High in Isaiah 43:6 just talk about the north? Why did the Most High only mention the south? Even though the Most High said the ends of the earth and far away, didn't mention specifically the west and the east, but I still wanted to give you the information that identifies um, the places in the west and the east, and there was a reason why. And so, where was the west? There were two generals that took over after Alexander from the west. The one that took over for the west era was named Cassander. He took over Europe, Syria, and Jordan. And so the general that took over the east, that took over Iran and Persia, was Seleucus. Seleucus took over Asia, Babylon, and Syria. Now, it's just identified. So Daniel had this dream. Daniel had this dream, and when um, Alexander passed away, um, um, the four generals represented, I'm sorry, let me go back. Daniel had this dream about the ram and the goat. And I talked about this in day 17. And so what happened, you had this ram. This ram identified these people from this geographical location, these people of these ethnicities that lived in these groups. Just like when Genesis 10 talked about the table of the nations and then identified some of these people by name, but you still were able to identify the groups and who they were, right? Here's these places and here was these nations. Havala, it said. It didn't say, it didn't specifically go into each one. It just lets you know, I'm talking about Havala, these people and these places and their how they're associated. Just know that I'm talking about peoples and nations. Okay. And so this is why when Daniel had this dream about the ram and the goat, the ram, which identify all these these group of people with these similarities from this geographical location, which fell under the umbrella, which represented the ram, right? And then here was this scraggly goat, right? Who represented a group of people, seemed to be very insignificant compared to the big ram, but it still represented a group of people from an area, a geographical location, a way of life, and a way of thinking. And so here, when Daniel had this dream of this ram and this goat, and this ram was like a bully. He was doing everything he wanted to do, and he had control, and nobody bothered him, and he bullied everybody. And so here was this goat coming. The goat just seemed to just glide over, right? And prepared itself to fight this ram. And everybody was looking at him like, this ram, this little scraggly goat is not gonna beat this ram. This ram is gonna tear this scraggly goat up. But there's something about this ram, this goat. He seemed kind of supernatural because when he walked over, he didn't just, walk over. His feet never touched the ground. So maybe he had some type of supernatural powers, right? And so because we saw that. So maybe it's something about this goat that's gonna be able to overtake the ram, right? The ram was prepared for the fight, running in all directions like when you think about a bull, right? Huffing and puffing and getting ready for the fight, running back and forth, east, west, north, south, prepared to run and ram the goat. And then here was this goat just standing there, preparing. Wasn't doing all the, puffing itself up and all of that, adrenaline flowing. It was just standing there waiting. charged at each other. And all of a sudden, the goat ran into the ram, broke his horns, broke his horns. And people were astounded, right? Daniel was seeing his vision and his dream. And he couldn't believe that this little scraggly goat had broke this powerful ram's horns. And so again, this ram represented certain nations, and this goat represented certain nations. And here this goat broke this ram down, and the ram, once the horns got broke, lost its power. Then this goat, scraggly as it was, became the power, had the power. And our times, and they say the juice, right? This goat had the juice, right? Now, the goat got a little beside itself. And so when Daniel, again, these horns were representative of the power. So when it knocked out the ram's horns, the goat from the fight broke off one of his horns from the fight. From one horn, two horns grew in its place, right? Now, still from the fight, it had a disability. So when the horns grew, one was still shorter than the other one. So the significance of the horn, one being shorter than the other, it represented a power. It also represented a people and a nation. And so here, when it talked about Alexander and the breaking off of the horns and two came up in his place, it would reference the four generals who took over these nations. And so here, when it talked about the breaking off of the horn and two coming up in this place, it was talking about um this goat's power, and the fact that when another horn came up, just didn't do the right thing. Even though it had the juice, it got beside itself. Okay, now let me stop there. I want to talk about the Horn of Africa. Who is the Horn of Africa? What is the Horn of Africa? The Horn of Africa is known as the Somalia Peninsula. It's the large peninsula of East Africa. It's located on the easternmost part of the African mainland. It's the fourth largest peninsula in the world. And so this Horn of Africa, if you've heard this in the word before, you want to know the Horn of Africa. Are they talking about this thing you blow? No, it's talking about Havala, a nation and a people. And so when you talk about the Horn of Africa, it's composed of Ethiopia, it's composed of Eritrea, it's composed of Somalia and Dabat, right? Djibouti, Djibouti, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. So you're talking about four different groups of people, four ethnicities, four geographical locations, but combine these four geographical locations and everybody up in it, it's considered the Horn of Africa. Now, so now you know. So what was the major trade route between Egypt and Babylon? It passed through Megiddo. 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 If you heard about Megiddo before, Megiddo is going to be research it. I don't want to get beside myself, but it's associated to Armageddon. Okay, but I'm gonna stay on the word right now so we can get done for today. I just want to get through this portion. So when we get back on day 19, we're gonna mention some of this stuff again, or we back into the scriptures. But I had to give you this information. So, what's the major trade route between Egypt and Babylon? It passed through Megiddo. So running through the land were two of the most important trade routes of the known world. On the seaward side was the major path for caravans. So there was a trade route that passed through these places we've been talking about. So like they would bring their caravans and they were on foot and they would walk through to get to one side or other to certain places. It was like this, like a major highway, right? So wherever you live, you have a major highway, or you can take the back roads. But in this case, this major highway, if you will. This is what they're talking about. And so this major trade route passed between Egypt and Babylon, Egypt and Iraq, right? Um, and so on the seaward side was the major pathway for the caravans. So they traveled by foot, light or land, and then the seaway. So the way to the sea, or this route this by water, was called the Via Maris, the Via Mars. This path followed the coastline from Egypt through Gaza to Joppa and Megiddo. So um, again, here I'm going to share with you another name for the land trade way. They call it the Hayam, Haym road. It's a route in Aleph, Israel. Via Mars, Via Maris is one modern name for the ancient trade route. They call it also the Hayam road. It dates from the early Bronze Age. And what it does is link Egypt with the northern empires of Syria, Anatolia, Mesopotamia, along the Mediterranean coast. And so remember, Mesopotamia, they identify it by other names. And so the Mediterranean coast of modern day Egypt, Palestine, Israel, Iran, Iraq, Turkey, Syria. Keep this in mind. Make sure you write it down. When they talk about Megiddo, Meggido, it's associated to um, Armageddon. It's mentioned, right? The hill of Megiddo, the place of Megiddo. Um, and so here it's telling you Hayam Road is also the Via Mars, which is the seaway, the ancient trade route, right? It's the same location. And so it understand that it's telling you this trade route, this this route links all these places together. You can actually get to all of these places by this major route highway. Just saying it's not a highway, just figuratively speaking. And so it connects Egypt, Palestine, Israel, Iran, Iraq, Turkey, and Syria. So on the Via Mars, the Hayam Road, you can get to all of these places if you just stay on the road. All right. Now, archipelago. What is archipelago? Archipelago is a cluster of islands. All right. Archipelago was mentioned on day 17. Here's another word I want you to write down. The Bab el Mandeb, B-A-B hyphen E-L, meaning the, Mandib, M-A-N-D-I-B. It's also the same route as the Hayam Road. It's also the same route as the Via Maris, okay? I was trying to do the research. I'm like, is this the same route they're talking about? Is this the same place? And so, in my opinion, I connected it clear, significantly connected. This questionable. Again, this is part of the veiling. Again, this is part of the covering up. Because unless I can actually go to the place, ask some people, find the ancient history connected to the modern day ideologies, I don't know. Okay? But let me tell you about this Bab el Mandeb. So the Bab el Mandeb is a strait between Yemen, right? The Arabian Peninsula, Debata, Atria, in the Horn of Africa. This Bab el Mandeb connects the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden. It's a canal. The Bab el Mandeb is the Arabic name meaning the Gate of Tears. Why? So it's called the Gate of Tears because um, of something that happened. The Arabics call it the Gate of Tears. And so, why was it called the Gate of Tears? Let me give you the geographical, a little bit of information, and then I'll tell you why it's the Gate of Tears, and then we're gonna bring this thing full circle today. So this Bab el Tears is an actual waterway. It's a canal. It has Yemen on one side, of Ethiopia on the other side. Remember Ethiopia, Sudan, right? Um, and then this waterway canal. Remember, you go to all these places through the Bab el Mandeb, the waterway. Remember, they mentioned land pathway and also waterway. And so you can get to all these different places through the land waterway. The land pathway is also the waterway. Now, remember it talked about the four headwaters. It also opened up to the Red Sea. We're talking about these same geographic locations. We're talking about these same canals and waterways, okay? This particular belt of Mandeb, it backs up to the Red Sea. It flows in from the Arabian Sea and also from the Gulf of Aden. Today, this Bab el Mandeb is a major exportation gateway. And I'm gonna step away from this for a minute because you all need to go and study the first 2 or 3 chapters of Revelations and also chapter 7 because when in chapter 7 it talks about the Most High is saying, I'm gonna cut off all of these exports and goods, and I'm gonna stop all of this. And it lines up with biblical prophecy because it's talking about these major arteries, waterways, and and transportation landmarks that are going to be cut off, okay, at the end time. All right, let me get back. So why is the Bab el Mandeb important? The Bab el Mandeb is a vital link on the trade route between the Mediterranean and Asia. Vessels carry goods from Europe and Asia, oil from the Middle East to Europe, North America. So you have to pass through it if you're going to Egypt, right? Egypt's Suez Canal. This waterway gets its name because it's dangerous to travel on it. And so according to the Arab legend, um, this Arab legend, it says the reason that it's called the Gateway of Tears is because there were people, lots of people who drowned. There was an earthquake and then the people drowned. And the physical evidence of this gateway of tears or this waterway is that when this earthquake had came, it separated Asia from Africa. So at one point it may have been connected, but when this great earthquake happened, it's legendary that it separated Asia from Africa. Now, some of you all that have been with me when I was teaching Revelations, and I was doing the same thing, lining up the information with the people from uh, the nations and where they were from and the hereditary lines and genealogies. And I was always connecting all of this together. And so I said one day, which it confirmed as I was doing the research for this teaching, that the maps were changed. Here is saying, here is this legend that said there was this great earthquake. And when this great earthquake happened, it separated Asia from Africa. And so think about this. If Asia and Africa were connected at one point, geographically, hereditarily, it's very possible that some of the people were the same people. But over time, when the land was separated, the people became separated and indifferent. Nobody talks about this. All right. Bab el Mandeb is also an important link between the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea, going through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. It mentioned Atria. So Atria it's a Greek name. They gave the Red Sea the name Atria. So officially, Atria is a place. It's a country in the Horn of Africa. I mentioned that earlier. The capital of Atria is Asmara. It's bordered by Sudan in the west, Ethiopia in the south, Dabbatai in the southeast. The northeastern parts of Atria have their coastline along the Red Sea. The nation has a total area of 117,600 miles. 45,406 square miles. That includes the Dalek archipelago. A little bit of information I want to share with you about the people of Eritrea. So, people of Eritrea, multi-ethnic country. It means these people are from everywhere. They have 9 recognized ethnic groups. The population of Eritrea is 6 million. You have me in a coming day talk about the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz, Hormus, is at the center of the world. There's an actual place that's the center of the world. It borders Arabia and Persia. By the way, Persia is Iran. The Strait of Hormuz is shrouded in exoticism and danger. The Strait of Hormuz is both the end and the center of the world. So they identify this place, this geographical location, as being the center and the end of the world. Um, write that down. Keep it in mind. This thing is coming full circle today. Okay. I had to give you all this information so you can identify and understand the people, the places. Write this down. RAS S Raz Sayan Siyyan or SRAS first word Siyan. What is that? That's a place. It's a peninsula in the Obak region of Dabotai. The same place, which is in the Horn of Africa. And so this Ras Sayan is a point, right? It's a point, a place. It's like a point. So coming from this waterway that extends called the Bab el Manda, um, there's this point that reaches out into the water. All right. It's about 20 kilometers southwest of Param Island. So on this Ras Sayan, this hill, at the top of this hill is it's a volcanic hill, right? So you have this this waterway that runs. You have this piece of land that comes out on the waterway. And so on this peninsula called the Ras Siam is this reddish volcanic hill. It's about 1.2 by 0.5 kilometers, 138 meters high, and it's connected towards the mainland. So it extends out to the water. It has a sandy strip, right, that runs north and south. And then it gets wide, and then it has this kind of volcano on top of it. Look that up. It's going to be relevant in the coming days. Now, one other thing I want to talk about before we end today, I want to talk about the Danakil, Danakil depression. What is that? It lies at the junction of 3 tectonic plates. It has a history based on geography, like where it is, geography, right? And so, what happened with the Danakil depression? It developed as a result of Africa and Asia moving apart. Remember the Arabic legend? It talked about this great earthquake that separated Asia and China. And so, as a result of Asia and China being, Africa and China being, Africa and Asia, I'm sorry, being separated, it left a depression in the earth from the separation. And so, as a result of African Asia moving apart, it caused rifting and it caused volcanic activity. It caused erosion. It caused a inundation by the sea. So oftentimes, the ground will rise up and the ground will fall down. So it caused this geographical activity. All right. And so what happened was over time, because of this, tectonic plates, it moved the, the ground surface, the actual bottom of the land areas when it supposedly drifted apart, right? Or the earthquake moved it. And so what happened was it caused this indentation in the air. I mean, in the ground. And so this depression, this indenture in the ground, it says the hottest temperature and the lowest geographical point. Remember, it mentioned that the Ras Ayan is the center and the point of the earth, and here was this depression in the same place. And so, because it's the center of the earth and the end of the earth, it's the hottest temperature. Um, it's also the lowest place on the earth. And so, this depression goes deep, 100 meters below sea level. How is that? How can it be? Right? It's it's amazing factual information. And if you could ever see it, you probably would come into a better understanding and have a lot more clarity. But this particular Ra Sayan in this place is the center and the end of the earth. And here's where this depression is in the ground, and it's supposed to be the lowest point on earth, but the hottest point on earth. And how could that be? So consider, if you will, a valley, a small valley, and it's hot. Consider, if you will, this point that stands out from the water, but also has a volcano on top of it. The amazing power of the Most High, complex, right? um, I'm gonna end here, right? We're gonna pick up uh, on day 19. We're gonna pick up talking about Daniel's dream because I mentioned Daniel's dream. So I had to give you all this information from Genesis 10 and Genesis 2. It help you identify the people in relation to the nations and what was their origin and who they came from. Because if you didn't know this, you won't be able to understand the interpretation and the messages that are going to come. If you don't know who those people are, then you won't know who you are. And so you have to be able to identify. And so that's what the word showed me and which I share with you. And so when we come back, remember day 17 and also today, I talked about Daniel's dream. And so when I come back, we're going to be at Daniel chapter 2. And we're going to talk about this dream. We're going to talk about some of Daniel's dreams again. Okay. And we're going to interpret those dreams. We're going to break down those dreams and how it relates to everything that we've been going through for the last two times that we met. So all of this is irrelevant. I want you to come back and stay with me because eventually we're going to get into that hidden prophecy. As you all been hearing me talk about today, I was talking about the unveiling, the uncovering. And so all of these things, in case you didn't know, were hidden from you. They weren't clarified to you. Um, Maybe they weren't intentionally held from you, but it left you with questions and misunderstanding. And so you didn't know. You just didn't know. And maybe if you would have known some of this information, it may have changed on your approach, your thought, the way you do things. And see, that's the whole point of the matter. Once you know, it will change you. You need to know. The reason that there was a covenant failing, because they didn't want you to know. Something or somebody didn't want you to know. Come on back for day 19. We're going to get to that hidden prophecy. We're going to get through this information. I want y'all to please come back and stay with me. Let's end this. It came full circle as far as what was supposed to be given to you today. And I hope you took something away from it and researched it deep and study to show yourself approved. Go back and find the information. Come back with some clarity so we can do this thing. We can understand this thing. And so I want to thank the Most High for being in the room. I want to thank the Most High for the word today. I want to thank the Most High for bringing clarity and understanding. I want to thank the Most High for an extension and abounding of knowledge, for an awakening. It's just the beginning. Thank you, Most High, for everything, all of your grace and mercy. And until I meet your people on day 19, I ask that everyone be blessed. Peace, love, and light. Come back. Good night.